Hey everyone, welcome to the May webinar in my Childless Chats Over Cocktails series. I am really excited to be joined by Laura and Kadi from Anotherhood. Today they are amazing and we're going to be talking all about friendship and how your friendships have been impacted by your childlessness. So I know we've gotten a lot of activity on Instagram as we've been promoting this webinar and talking about it. So I know it's something you guys are really interested in, and these two have the best friendship story, so I think it's gonna be really fun to chat with them today. A little bit about me, I'm Kadi. I run chasingcreation.org, and I started that just over a year ago, and did it as a way to connect with other women who are childless. And I run a couple of things, so these webinars once a month that are all about different topics related to childlessness. And then I also have a monthly support group. So if you're looking for a little bit more support, they're very different from this format. They're only limited to 8 people, and it gives us a chance to really get more personal and talk through what challenges you're having in your life. So let's see, just a few housekeeping tips before we start. So while you guys can see and hear us, we can't see or hear you, but you can participate through the chat box. So if you want to do that, you can add your comments. To practice, I would love to hear where you guys are joining from and what you're drinking. So I know this is called Childless Chats Over Cocktails. They were originally evening events, and now they're daytime events to allow people from the UK to join. So I went somewhere in the middle today. So I am drinking coffee, but it's spiked with a little bit of Bailey's. So it's kind of an in-between. But yeah, please, if you are watching, let us know where you're from and what you're drinking in the chat box. So with that, I would love to have my guests introduce themselves. So Laura, can we start with you?
Yeah, of course. So, hi guys, really good to be here. I'm Laura and I live in a little place called Athelston Ford in Scotland. And yeah, I've known that I've been infertile since my early teens, and ever since then till the age that I am now, my body has just kind of let me know that actually kids aren't on the radar for me. So I'm sat here and I'm joining you with a mocktail. It's seedlip with some tonic, and seedlip is this amazing alcohol-free liquor, which sounds really bizarre, but it's really nice. It's all botanical. But yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. Let me see, what else could I tell you? I'm an illustrator and I'm an art therapist as well, and I'm just really chuffed to be sitting here tonight with you guys.
Awesome, thank you for joining. Kadi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Kadi. I'm in Santa Monica, Los Angeles. I'm drinking, it's 10 a.m. here, so I'm drinking coffee, iced coffee, a responsible adult. And let's see, I'm in my late 30s now. When I was in my early 30s, I was diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency, or POI. And within about a year, I was fully early menopausal. And that was right around the time that like all my friends started to have babies and started to have kids and stuff like that. So that sort of inspired me to reach out and find a community, which, you know, I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, I work in the animation industry, and I just chilling here with my 2 cats who are probably going to be meowing through this whole thing. So just that's that.
Awesome. Well, welcome. We have a lot of people who have responded here in the chat box. So it looks like we have almost an equal mix of people from the US and people in the UK, and a huge amount of variety in what they're drinking, from water to coffee to tea to beer. We've got a whole bunch of drinks going on too. So to let you guys know, a lot of you have put in your chats are just going to panelists. So you have the choice of whether you want to set it to just panelists, or if you want to be able to have other participants who are viewing at home see your comments as well. That's the way you guys can kind of chat with each other or respond to what we're saying too. So if you want to switch that, you can click on the to box and switch it to all panelists and attendees if you want to be able to see each other's at home. So okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started with the discussion. So this first question, Kadi, I'm going to direct to you. So, okay, so you guys have such a good story of how you met and became friends. So I wanted to just hear a little bit about your story.
Sure. So I think it was roughly like November of 2017. I was on my way to a baby shower for someone who I was kind of tangentially friends with, sort of friend of a friend. I didn't really know that well. And I knew that I was going to be I knew that the only other person at the baby shower that I knew was her. So I was already a little bit like, baby showers are a hard thing for me, and I know for a lot of people in our community. And so I was already kind of feeling a little like, I'm not sure. And on my way there, I saw a little advertisement for a women's health symposium called Cycles and Sex. And it was right in the same neighborhood that the baby shower was in. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll just like stop off there and like check that out and before I head over to this thing. And I got there, thinking that like, okay, maybe I'll like meet someone else who has had a similar sort of infertility journey, or I'll learn a little bit more about early menopause or whatever it was, because I really didn't have a lot of information or any real community at that time. So I was certainly looking for that. And I got there and there was so much information about all kinds of women's health issues. Of course, like the notion of going to the baby shower just completely washed away the second I stepped through the door. But I wasn't really finding anything that I felt sounded like my story. So there was a woman, a very friendly looking woman working at a booth for a fertility clinic. And I just sort of went up to her and I was like, hey, this is me. This is my story. This is what I'm looking for. Do you have any resources to suggest? And she really didn't, but she took an interest and she took my email address, and that was kind of that. And I just went on with my day and never thought much else about it. And then.
Yeah, little did you know.
Over to Laura.
I was sat on the sofa at home. I had just been 6 months prior diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. So I was in a whole journey of trying to get myself better, and in the point that my body felt like it was failing on every level, and I felt very lonely and very lost. And I was online trying to find things that I could do, people I could speak to, and everything was for like retired people or really young people. Or when I started to look about infertility, it was about people wanting to get pregnant, and I was like, well, that's not what I want. And I was thinking, hang on, I know a pal in the States and they're more outspoken than we are, the British are definitely. Do they have anything? Is there something like a model I could follow or something that I could implement over here? So I pinged out this email to my friend, and she got back to me and she said, that's really funny. I met somebody the other week at a seminar that I was doing. I'm going to hook you guys up via email and just let you take it from there. So that's how that kind of universe kind of brought us together in a way.
Yeah, and Laura reached out first. I remember Carly, or her friend, sort of, connected us, and I was a little bit sort of sitting on it. I was like, I don't know this person. I was just a little nervous. And Laura reached out first, and within like a minute, we were sending each other these very dense emails about like all of the things we had been through and all of the things we were feeling. And it was clear that neither one of us had ever really had the opportunity to express like the depth of some of that, like the grief and the experience, and even sort of the day-to-day, like I went to a doctor and this doctor said this and I didn't believe it, so I went over here and then he said that, just like the like little ins and outs that go along with infertility and any sort of health issue. And it's funny because I think we go back now every now and then and look at some of those early emails and we were like, whoa, like I was really laying it out for a stranger.
But we had nothing to lose. Like, yeah. I felt like I had nothing to lose. I was like, this is a bit weird. This is a total stranger. But actually, if this person is infertile, she might just get it. And it was like that. It was almost like, for me, nearly like 15, 16 years of something that I've been carrying and trying to process. Suddenly, I wrote one sentence, it felt like, and it was like, Kadi got it. And it was like, couldn't wait the next day to get up. And you said this, Kadi, like checking our inboxes to see, oh, do we have something? Because all of a sudden it took that loneliness away. And I didn't feel like I was lost walking around by myself. I suddenly thought there's somebody else out here that gets this.
Yeah. And we took pretty quickly we moved it from email to WhatsApp, leaving each other like voice messages, because, you know, it's different times. So getting on the phone, we thought might be too hard, but we were leaving each other these like very expansive WhatsApp voice messages. And she would call me, or she would leave a message at some point, and then I would leave her a message during my like massive commute to work. And I would, you know, and then it kind of quickly turned from being all about infertility to being about work and life and traffic and homes and, you know, like all of the things that you just talk about with your friends. And it became a friendship and not necessarily like a support system for one thing, but a support system for life.
Yeah, because we were saying yesterday, like the day we met, so I was in the States for a wedding, so we decided we would meet up. And that day we didn't speak about us being infertile at all. It was just like, wow, we're actually together. We've been chatting for like a year. Let's just hang out. And I said this to Kadi yesterday. I remember the main focus being we were irate. We couldn't find a turmeric latte. That was the main thing. But we just walked around San Francisco for hours and hours. And then we met my husband in the evening and had dinner. And it was just, yeah, I didn't want you to go home, and I didn't want to go home.
I know. I was like, can I catch a later plane? Yeah. That was the only one. That was the only time we've met in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a fun story. And I think like I really relate to what you guys are saying about the fact that if you meet other women who are childless and really longing to connect with someone on that, those personal details can come up so quickly. And I see that all the time in when I start talking with people who contact me through Chasing Creation, either through email or Instagram, that they're really eager to share their stories because they felt really misunderstood for so long, and they don't maybe have someone in their life that really will get it. Like they can just lay it out, and someone else on the other end that's like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think a lot of people are just missing that in their lives. So I think it's so cool how you guys met. And I think it's really interesting, Laura, that you said that you think that Americans are more open about it than those in the UK, because I actually did a Twitter thread about this where I was saying that I felt like there were a lot more voices, at least on the childless piece, from the UK. Like when I was looking at Twitter accounts, blogs, like people who were openly talking about being childless, I felt like it was more voices from the UK, and it seemed like a lot of people thought that it was more taboo in the US. So I actually am putting together a poll while we're talking. So I'm going to have a few questions on it, but those of you who are at home, since we've got a good mix, that'll be one of the questions. So
oh, that's cool.
Stay tuned. Okay, so sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. Okay, so you guys met, you became friends, you developed this really bonded friendship, and then now you run Anotherhood together. So first, start by letting us know where people can find you. So if your Instagram handle, your website, but then also tell us a little bit about where did the idea come from, and then what does it look like now for Anotherhood?
Yeah, okay. So you can find us at anotherhood.org, or you can follow us on Instagram at anotherhood_stories. Where did it all start? Well, it really started like at the very beginning when Kadi and I started chatting. So as we said, like when we started talking, it was all about infertility, and it was all about that we kind of felt alone and there wasn't a voice out there, or we couldn't find the niche that we felt reflected us. So we're like, yeah, let's do this, let's jump into this, let's create this awesome thing. And so we had a spreadsheet and we came up with different ideas, and then it just kind of fizzled out as we dropped off the infertility chat and we got to know each other and we became friends. And that was what was needed at that point. And then last year I kind of messaged Kate, I think it was probably about March, it might have been this time last year, and I was like, I'm ready to do this. are you? Shall we get on board? And so there was lots of silly things like doodling and figuring out names and sending it to close pals saying, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And we landed on Anotherhood. I think the name's kind of self-explanatory. It's kind of like, well, it's not motherhood, it's not parenthood, it's not fatherhood. We're another and hood. So, and it wasn't anywhere else. So that was good. So, yeah, then we just started, we needed that time to kind of figure out for ourselves what we wanted to do. So we knew we really wanted to raise the voices of women without children. And for us, it wasn't just women that are infertile, it's women who don't have children through circumstance or through choice. And we just thought, we want to add to these collective stories. We want to raise the volume. We want to celebrate this. We want to embrace it. We really want to put the positive on it, because what I was finding, there was a lot of negativity about it, and we get it, we really do get it. We know ourselves it's not easy. We know it's full of obstacles and challenges, but we really just wanted to be able to say, you know what? There's other women out there doing amazing, fantastic things. You're not alone in this. And so that's kind of how it was born. And so we started interviewing people from all different walks of lives, and we've done, I think we're about 14 or 15 interviews. Kadi did one yesterday. I did one in the middle of last week, and I've got another hooked up coming up this week. And we've had women from a lot from the States and quite a few from the UK, which has been great. Yeah, have I missed anything, Kadi?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it. I think we also were kind of looking for, you know, when you Google infertility community, or, you know, when you start to like reach out, I think initially a lot of the resources are for women who are trying to get pregnant, for women who are, you know, in the process of IVF, or not even pregnant, trying to family build, you know, they're in the process of IVF or surrogacy or adoption or whatever it is. And there isn't really a lot of resources for women for whom that is off the table for whatever reason, you know. And I think that's kind of where we started from. And we say, you know, any woman who's struggling to get pregnant, like, we hold you in our hearts for sure. But our community, we really appreciate is that sort of looking to that next step of like, okay, this is what my life looks like. Like, how do I expand that? What does that mean? What does it look like for you and for you and for you? You know, trying to really build a larger group of people to sort of celebrate that, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, I was just to say, Kadi hit on that point about it being off the table. So like for Kadi and I, for us to have kids was never an option. We didn't find out we were infertile because we were trying to get pregnant.
Right.
We just knew. So we've had that balance, and I think that's what connected us quite quickly also, that we both knew for us that it had impacted romantic relationships. It had made decisions. It was things like, oh, I've met somebody. When the hell am I going to tell them that actually I can't have kids because it's make or break? So there was also about putting that out there, that it's not, you don't always find out that you're infertile when you go and have a baby, but also empower women to say, you know what, it's not all about having babies as well.
Yeah. Well, and I do love too that you guys are also create space for women who are childless or child-free for any reason. So women who are child-free by choice, or women who are childless by circumstance, like yourselves, women who maybe didn't go through all of the infertility because they already knew at a younger age that they weren't able to have kids. So there are so many different, well, I like what Jody Day says, that there are like a lot of doors that lead to childlessness, and it could be childlessness or child-free, but everyone's stories are so unique. And I think that sometimes the child-free and childless community can feel divided, and there's a lot of debates about who can use what terminology and where do you fit. And I understand there are definitely some differences in the experience of women who, you know, didn't want to have kids versus women who wanted to but couldn't. There's a different level of grief and processing that needs to happen between those two groups. And then there, I think, are people in the middle who maybe were a little bit more ambivalent and they don't neatly fit into either category. So I do think it's a spectrum, and I like that you guys are really inclusive of everybody along that, because I think that while those who are child-free by choice and those who are childless not by choice, there's still a lot of similarities in how our lives are impacted, just being women in the world without children, and how we're viewed by society and what kind of issues come up related to that. So I think what you guys are doing is so cool. So if you look out into the future with Anotherhood, what do you guys envision? Like, do you have other things that you want to add, or or are the interviews kind of what your focus will remain?
No, we have dreams. We definitely have dreams. Sometimes it's about grounding ourselves a little bit. I remember when Kadi said to me, "Blue sky your dreams," and I was like, what does that mean? I have no idea what blue sky means, which always makes me laugh. That's one of Kadi's and my things, is trying to understand what each other are saying sometimes. But yeah, so we would kind of like to do a podcast is one of our things, definitely. We're playing around with a few ideas at the moment. And also we would kind of like to move out of the virtual platform and look to be able to create something where we can see real life people together in a group, in a room doing something. So that's our real big one. That's the really big one that we would like to do. And we're still figuring out what that looks like. And yeah, we're doing the interviews, but we're really looking also to get women to share their stories in their own creative way, whether that's through poetry, whether that's through a piece of artwork, or a piece of music. We really like to kind of invite as much creativity to it as well, because I think that's a massive part of for me, that's a massive part of Anotherhood. I come from a creative background. Kadi works with creatives, so I think that's really key to us. So yeah. And Anotherhood's just developing, really. We only launched it launch seems like a really weird word, because organically it just happened. In December.
December, that's right. Yesterday we were talking about this a little bit, and we kind of joked that like our ultimate goal is that we can hang out again. Like rather than like trying to find a way to see each other in person for so long, you know. But yeah, no, I think that's it. I think creating like a real community that is having the virtual community is awesome. And I know this is like part of a larger conversation happening right now about like everyone kind of coming together again. But ultimately, I think that would be great if we could get like, you know, have a network where we can all kind of hang out.
Yeah, and it'd be awesome if we can have one that's like Scottish based and LA based, and obviously Scottish based means I've got to do UK, so I would do England and Wales and Ireland, and that would be cool. So I quite happily pack my bags and just like travel around doing things like that. I'd be happy.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, I'm excited to hear that you guys have some other plans for what Anotherhood could morph into. And I do think that, and maybe it's just because I wasn't paying attention, you know, 2 years ago when I had my hysterectomy, to like child-free after infertility accounts, but it does seem like I'm starting to see more voices popping up in the social media space, and people who, there are a lot of blogs, I think, of people who remain anonymous, which can be extremely supportive, and I understand why people may not want to put themselves out there. But I think it adds a different feel when people are willing to just be open about who they are and put their name and their face out there for people, and to like have, I just really like that it feels like we're starting to form a community. And for me, I think a lot of that's happened on Instagram, where there are quite a few accounts now popping up that just feel very supportive and are creating spaces individually, but then where we can find opportunities to bring those communities together for these like larger conversations like today. So yeah, so cool what you guys are doing. So I want to shift a little bit from hearing about, you know, you guys and what you're doing with Anotherhood to the idea of friendship. So the first question I have is going to be about relationships with friends who are parents. And I think this one's really tricky because in my mind, what I've seen, or how I think about this, is that you're really balancing two different needs of the people at the same time. So if you are childless not by choice, you are probably going through a grief cycle and coming to terms with the fact that you are not going to be able to be a mom, and there's a certain level of protection that you have to take with where you're at in terms of how you can, how supportive or how much you can be involved with your friends who are having kids. So I know a lot of people say that like baby showers are very hard. I've had a few, births in the last few years within my close network, and it is difficult to show up and hold that brand new newborn baby in your arms and still be able to hold that space where like you can be excited for your friend and also be holding that grief at the same time. So I just think that it's really complex. And I think even if you are child-free by choice, I would imagine that just the difference in priorities, it can just be very hard to stay on the same page. And then from the perspective of your friend who just became a parent, while you're processing your grief, they are now entering this new phase that is really exciting, joyful, probably I would imagine very scary, like everything about what their day-to-day life looks like is changing. And so they may have less energy to be there for you, or just, not getting any sleep, and everything just looks so different. So for me, I think it's been the friendships that I've been able to keep very strong through this are the ones where each person is giving and respectful and compassionate. So while there may be things that I can't do, like maybe I can't come to your baby shower, or maybe I will if it's like my absolute best friend or a sister, I'll suck it up and go and be there. But yeah, I think if I can't do that, then I want to find other ways I can support them. So I may send them like a text or a note, just letting them know how much they mean to me and how excited I am for them. I may send them a gift with a note saying like, hey, I wish I could be there for you today. This is really hard for me, and explain why I can't show up, but let them know that I'm thinking about them. And I think with my friends, from that perspective of what I've needed from them, I've had friends who have been able to keep showing up for me, even when they're busy or distracted or whatever. Like they take an interest in what's going on in my life. When we talk, they ask me about me and what's going on. They're supportive. So I think it really is just this mix of like having to navigate a lot of really difficult situations. But if both people are interested in each other's lives, patient, understanding, respectful of each other's boundaries, listening to what the other person needs, like there's just a lot of give and take that has to happen. So that's kind of my take on it, but I would love to hear from you guys, to hear how have you navigated your relationships with your friends who are moms?
Well, I was kind of gonna say, for me, it's not navigate. I guess it's still navigating, because I'm learning myself. And yeah, a lot of it I find is being really aware of what I need for me. And okay, yeah, I've known since my early teens, but late teens, sorry, my late teens, but it was kind of okay then because nobody was getting pregnant. But as I got older, people started to get pregnant. And I guess one of the things is, if I have an intuition or a gut feeling that somebody's going to get pregnant, it's a bit easier. But if I get like a sonogram picture or something for somebody that I didn't think or I wasn't aware, that's harder. That is a lot harder. But I am always excited for them. I'm always, because they're moving into something that's really exciting. It's a new chapter for them. But it is like what you say, Katie, there's an underlying like, ugh, what's gonna happen now? Like, how's this gonna look? And I had a discussion with one of my pals about this on Monday. We've been good friends for 3 or 4 years. We became really close when we were studying together. And she wasn't somebody that I thought at the time was gonna get pregnant. And she did. And we discussed it and we laid it out really like properly, as in, I might find this really hard at certain points if you do this, but what I need you to do is don't exclude me. because that's the thing that I find the hardest. If somebody decides to protect me, and I'm going to go protect me, by not telling me something or by not including me in something, that hurts more because that ostracizes me even more and puts me outside. I much rather be given the option to choose to attend or not attend, or to be able to have that sometimes really gut-wrenching hard conversation, which I've had to do before when I've gone away with groups of friends and somebody's got a newborn, and I've said to them before we've gone away, please don't be offended if I don't hold your baby, or please don't pass me your baby. It's nothing to do with you. It's about me, and I don't think in that moment I'm going to manage. But at the same time, I'm also somebody, if I'm away with a group of friends, I'm the one that's crawling on the floor with all the kids because I really enjoy it. So it's a real mix. I don't know if I'm answering that very clearly, but I think it comes down to being really aware of how you are and finding your voice and being able to say that to your friends. It's having really good, strong communication. And once you've got that, it's good. And it doesn't always work, but...
Well, I think that's what's hard, is like you can only control your side of it. You can't control how they're going to react. So for me, I do spend a lot of time planning in advance for those conversations, where I try to think about how can I say this in a way that's compassionate, that's loving, that's not about them, but that's more about how I'm impacting what I'm going through, so that it doesn't sound like I'm attacking them or criticizing them. And I think it just depends on that person's reaction. Like, you know, my sister had a baby last year, and I was able to be there like right after, and you know, within like a few days after the baby was born. And I had so much fun that weekend getting to like be there with my new little niece. And but there were some times where holding her, I just broke down in tears. Like it is really hard. But my sister was just so sweet, and she said like, it's okay. Like I get where you're at. You don't have to feel like you have to hold that in or, you know, change your reaction. Like if you need to cry, like I get it. I'm here for you. And that could have been a totally different experience if I had been holding that baby and started crying and she took that as like a personal thing or got weird about it. So I think that is what's hard, is like you can only control your half of it, and the other person on the other end of the friendship really has to be willing to meet you where you're at and come at you back with like compassion and empathy. And I think if both people can do that throughout, you can remain strong, because you're being understanding, you're giving each other what you need at the time. But I think it is easy to have miscommunications, or if you have a friend that maybe isn't really strong in those areas, they may not be able to come back at you with what you're needing at the time, and that can be really difficult.
Yeah, and I think also there's a level of just sort of grace that you have to show each other. You know, I think they're going through something. Laura and I often use the term that we're like speaking totally different languages than our friends who are mothers sometimes, and they're going through something that like I don't know what it's like. I mean, I've seen many of them go through it, and I get that it's exhausting and it's all of the things, and they don't know what we're going through. So there's a little bit of like cutting each other some slack, I think, that has to happen. You know, I've certainly had moments where I'm like, well, I sure wish my friend so-and-so had, you know, chimed in here, or, you know, whatever. And then realizing like, actually, they're on a whole different trip, and that's totally fine. And we'll come together when we come together, and that's just gonna have to be okay. And I think that's why it's important to find another community to sort of like fill in some of those gaps. But knowing that, like, I think our friendship for them is just as important as it always was. There just isn't the space. And that's something that I know I have to remind myself often. Like, it's not that our friendship has exploded, it's the life has changed. And that happens on a lot of levels, you know? People move away, people get jobs, whatever it is. Friendships change. And this is a major change with a lot of very deeply seated, you know, emotional issues. But at the end of the day, you love each other. And that's what matters.
Yeah.
And sort of tapping back into that and being like, you know what? You've been my friend for 20 plus years. We're not jiving right now, but I love you, and I'll be back. I'm here and you're there. And
yeah,
you know.
and I think sometimes maybe if you have a little space, you can come back together when circumstances have changed, or like I've noticed just in the last 2 years since my hysterectomy, where I'm at with my grief is at a completely different level than it was during infertility or right after my hysterectomy or that year after. Every year I seem to get a bit stronger and I'm able to handle a lot more. So something I could never have done 2 years ago, maybe totally fine right now where it doesn't impact me that much. So I think a lot of it is also about like where each person is and what they're able to give at that time, and also what they're able to be around without needing to protect themselves. So, okay, so there's so much great activity in the chat box that I'm trying to kind of keep up in there, but there's a lot. So if you guys have questions, because we are going to be moving into questions, instead of adding them in the chat box, if you guys will use the Q&A function that's in the bottom so that I can keep those separate from chat. So we will be getting those in about 10 minutes. So if you have questions for me or my guests, go ahead and add those into the Q&A box. But it is fun to see you guys all chatting with each other. I appreciate everybody staying really respectful, and looks like you're having some good conversation. So, okay, before we get to the next question, I did put together a little poll here that I'm going to launch. So in a second, you'll see this on your screens. So go ahead and add your answers here, and we'll come back to the results in a few minutes. So you guys should see that up on your screen now. Okay, so in terms of finding friends who are childless or child-free, I want to kind of move into that and talk about what you guys have found has worked for you, or suggestions that you might have. I know I have a lot of ideas on this because this is something that about a year ago, well, actually 2 years ago now, I moved to this cabin in the woods that I'm in, and it was a completely new state. I didn't know anybody here. And I had spent the few years before that really not having a lot of energy to invest in friendships. And so I had moved the year before that as well. So I was in a new state there, and I didn't really try that hard to make friends because I just felt like my grief was so deep where I was at. I didn't feel like I had much to give, honestly. I didn't think I could be a good friend to someone. But moving here, I was in a totally different place. So my mindset was like, I want to get a couple of really good close girlfriends quickly. And so I have some ideas about how I did that were really successful, but I'm excited to hear from you guys as well, because I know you obviously started Anotherhood in hopes that you could create like this community online and connect with other women who are childless or child-free. So I would love to just hear from you guys first. What advice do you have for those who are looking for new friendships with other childless or child-free women, either online or in person?
I think Laura and I, it's funny, we have both approached, outside of our friendship, we've both approached this in different ways. And I will say this, like, this is just what's worked for me or for Laura. This is, it's not like a friendship specialist. It's just sort of what, this is, through my own trial and error, how it's sort of gone. And I think, I found myself often sort of like in those moments where I knew that I needed someone to do something with, like physically, like I have tickets to something, or I want to go check this thing out. And all of my friends have children and couldn't go, or for whatever reason. I would find myself kind of going through my phone and being like, okay, who have I met maybe like once or twice that I really vibed with that I think might not have kids? And just sort of start like reaching out, like, hey, we equate it a little bit to dating, which is like, as we all know, the worst, but I think this is a little bit more of an easier process. Just sort of reaching out and saying like, hey, you want to go to this thing? You want to go to this show, or go grab a cup of coffee or whatever? And just kind of trying to start a friendship organically. And I think one of the big mistakes I've made is kind of right off the bat being like, so we both don't have kids, let's talk about it, because that's obviously the foundation of my reason for, reaching out to various people, but that's not necessarily their reason for like agreeing to go to the thing with you or whatever. So I think once you do sort of establish a flow with someone who might have the same life circumstance you are, not making it about that life circumstance is really important. And if that's something that can come into it or that you can grow from, I think that's great. But ultimately, just trying to really find people that you can get along with that outside, and not make it about infertility or childlessness or whatever it is.
Yeah,
I think has been important for me.
Yeah. And I guess I would say, like, for me, I would say follow your passion. Like, that's where all my friends kind of lie. And I've got friends who are mums, and I've got friends that are not mums, and I found them through doing my passion. So, like, I love mountain biking. So I've met a lot of women through cycling networks. I've done big, long endurance cycles, and we get each other. And some of those women have got kids, but we don't talk about fertility and infertility. We talk about bikes, and it's great, and we talk about the next adventure we want to go on, and that's great. Or like my dog, my rescue dog. Wow, dogs are great conversation starters. And I belong to a group called the Scottish Instagram Dogs, which sounds really sad, but it's not actually. It's a really lovely way to connect to people. And so you just turn up at the beach, and there's like 15, 20 other people, and you're like, oh, your dog's so cool, where's he from? And you just talk about the dog, and then before you know it, you're like chatting away to these people. And then you do that thing, you have to have that conversation. You kind of walk away and you go, I kind of really got on with that person today when I was walking. Then I ask them if they want to go for a dog walk, and it's like the dog becomes the safety bit because you meet over the dog, but then you form a friendship through that. And like, I was at dog training, one of my closest pals now, who I walk with every week, sadly not at the moment, but we have just grown this amazing friendship through our dogs. But she's 10 years younger, and then some of my other pals, they're like 10, 20, 30 years older than me. So I just find I have this amazing range of women in my life that are really strong and powerful for all different reasons, but I have found them through my passion. So I haven't limited myself to go, oh, I just need to mix with women that are infertile. I've just, follow what you love. It would be my advice, really. Yeah.
Yes, I'll definitely echo that. That is one of the suggestions I had is get back into your hobbies. You know, I think that a lot of times if you're someone who has gone through a long bout of infertility, that may have been all consuming. I know for a lot of women it is, and it's very hard to have the energy to keep the other aspects of your life going that were important to you at one time. And so thinking about what do you enjoy? How do you want to spend your time? And if you didn't have really strong hobbies before, think about, taking up a new one. So when I moved to this new state, I was in a tricky situation because I work from home. So I don't meet anyone at work. I am not religious, so I'm not going to meet people at like church. I just don't belong to any like groups really. So I didn't have anything natural where I was going to a place where other people would be and we had like a sense of community. And so I really had to start from scratch. And so that was one of the ways I actually met someone. I went to a cheese making class, totally random, but it was like I met a girl there. She had come by herself, and she was kind of friendly. She asked me a couple questions, we chatted a little bit, and I found out she was new to the area too. And so I was like, hey, would you want to hang out sometime? Because she seemed cool, and we became really good friends. She is about my same age, but she has one son, but he's in college, so it kind of feels like she's childless. She doesn't talk about him a ton, and when she does, it's totally manageable for me. So I think if you have like hobbies and stuff that you're interested in, get out there, go volunteer, go do something you're passionate about, because then you're going to attract other people who are into that same interest. So whether that's like go to a wine tasting class if you're really into wine, and meet some friends who are also very into wine that you guys can go tour wineries together or whatever. So I think that's one way that can be really successful. The number one way that I've used is Bumble BFF, which I know probably people think I'm like sponsored by them. I'm not. I just have found a lot of success with the app. So if you don't know what that is, it is the friend version of the dating app Bumble. So make sure if you're going to use it that you have the friend setting on. You don't want to be looking for dates because it could get real awkward with your partner if you have one.
What do you do? Wanna be like,
But the Bumble BFF app is gendered. So if you sign up as a female, it will only show you other females that want to be friends. And it has just been amazing for me. I'm in a small community, so the fact that I've been able to build a network that I have here through it, if you're in like a larger city, I'm sure you'll have no problem. But it's just been great. You make a profile. It's the same thing as a dating app where you look through other people's profiles. You can swipe right if you're interested in connecting with them, left if you're not. And it asks you questions like, do you have kids? And so through that, you can actually change your settings. Like I did on mine. I just changed my settings to show, I don't want anyone to show that has kids. And so it's only showing me people without kids, which, you know, I have my top 3 besties have kids. So it's not that I'm trying to like exclude mothers. I love my mom friends, but just moving to a new community, I felt like that's what I was lacking, was the support there. And actually I've met 3 women here who have become like really, really close. We hang out a lot. And they are all 3 child-free by choice. And I have realized that's actually a really good thing for me to have in my life, because they have such a different perspective on it, where if they didn't want kids from the beginning, or, you know, decided not to have kids, I feel like there's so much I can learn from them in just hearing about why they made that decision. Because I think from my mindset, it felt like such a loss to not be able to have kids, and that's where the grief comes from, is, you know, wanting that and not being able to have it. But to hear this different perspective, that those voices a lot of times are just excluded from our society. Like, you do not hear that often from women who are child-free by choice, even though there are quite a few out there. And so getting to hear their perspective on why they made that decision has been very empowering for me, to see kind of a different side of it, and to help me focus on the benefits that I may get from not having children, and those perks that come with not having kids, that I think are harder to recognize when you're in the middle of that grief phase. So I really enjoyed that. I've also, when I lived in Charleston a couple years ago, I started a meetup, and I did meet some really great people from that. I literally just thought about, like, who do I want to be friends with? So I set up a group that was just called like progressive women in their 30s and 40s. Like,
Great.
Literally that's what the group was called. And within a couple months, it had like 800 members, which, you know, not all those people came to events. Probably like maybe 5 to 10 people showed up when I do events, but it was really fun. And I mean, for that, obviously it was more like meeting people who would share my political or kind of like social values, but that was a great way to meet friends. So those are my suggestions. I know it can be really hard, but I do think having a couple of people in your circle that are also childless or child-free can be really empowering. So we're going to move into questions here in a second. I want to just show you guys the poll results here. So let me pull those up on the screen. Okay, so do you have in-person friends who are childless? So 64% said yes, 36% said no. Ooh, do you think those in the UK or Americans are more willing to talk openly about infertility and childlessness? It is almost split. We're at 51-49, so maybe we're just equally willing to talk about it. Have you been able to keep your friendships with your besties who are moms strong? So only 15% said yes, 26% said no, and it looks like most of you are falling in the middle there at 59%. It's a mix. And my guess would be, again, like, it probably just depends on the individuals and where you're at and how much you're willing to come meet in the middle. How have you connected with other childless women? So it looks like the majority are online. So people could select more than one on here, which is why these are totaling more than 100%. So 72% of you have met people online, 13% through your interests or hobbies. 0 have used Bumble BFF. I'm telling you guys, go make an account. It's probably not going to be super effective right now because we're in the middle of a pandemic and you can't actually hang out with people. But maybe once, I don't know, once we can live our lives again. 15% of you have met people through meetup.com. So again, I love that one. 8% from work, 8% from church, and 26% other. So if you're one of the people who put other, I would love for you to share in the or in the chat box. What were those? What was that 26% other?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move into Q&A. It looks like we do have some questions that have come in here. So the first one, is there any way to plan an annual convention for Anotherhood?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right.
That'd be great.
I mean, I will say this is something I've thought a lot about because I actually plan conferences for my day job. And so I put a lot of thought into this. And I think there was one that ran a few years ago that someone else was doing. And I have not talked to the woman who organized that, but I did hear from someone else within the community that it just was not financially viable. Like she paid for it through her own money and didn't make up the expenses. And if anyone has ever planned a conference, they are insanely expensive. I mean, you can do it somewhat cheaply if you are resourceful, but it's really hard, especially if you're feeding people and getting convention or place to rent. So it is definitely a dream of mine. I think the difficulty is in building enough of a community, like a big enough community that you've got enough people that will attend it, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And even in the best case scenarios, I think you probably aren't going to make money on it. If you can come out even, that's great, which it's a lot of work if you're going to come out even or lose money. So it is wonderful to build, events like that for the community. And I would love to see that happening more, but the logistics of it it's really tough.
I can imagine.
So
I think for me, I kind of think about it, I'm like, maybe it's taking it away from the traditional convention, and maybe it's kicking it out into the outdoors a little bit, and maybe you have to go camping, and maybe you just kind of have to really get down with Mother Nature. I don't know, but that's me and my dream. You're used to that, Katie. You're used to me kind of going, maybe we do this, maybe we do that.
And me being like, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, like where I'm from here in near Asheville, North Carolina, it's a very outdoorsy place. We're right in the Smoky Mountains, and there are a ton of conferences, like women's retreats and stuff that do take place where you camp, and that could be really fun for sure.
Yeah. I think that would be really fun. That would be really relaxed, chilled out. It would be kind of nice to have breakout time, so it's not, because for me, when I think of convention, I think of kind of really clinical space, and I kind of think it needs to be somewhere you can break off, you can go and take some chill time, because it's going to be overwhelming at points. So it's nice to have it so it's like really holistic. It's looking after your body, your mind, your soul, and you can feed yourself in every way that you need to. So.
And I do think smaller retreats like that, if you have, maybe it's somewhere between 10 and 30 women, that are showing up to camp together, that's a very realistic group to pull together. Having enough people who are interested that will travel and show up to a convention, that's harder, I think, but it sounds like we're all on the same page of at least dreaming about something like this, so hopefully one day. Okay, so the next question is, how do you deal with the friendships you don't want to lose, but they're moms, and no matter how much you share with them, they say things that sting, not intentionally or out of malice, but there are so many opportunities to be hurt, and even though I love them, it hurts to continue to talk with them.
I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, actually. I think this is something that kind of comes back to that moment of grace a little bit, and having it with yourself and with your friend. If this is a friend that I think, in my experience, that you love deeply and loves you deeply, they're probably not trying to hurt you, I think. And so just knowing that you're being a little bit and this word I know is weird for people, but you're being a little triggered right now and they don't mean it. I think there's a way to I have found a way to just sort of step out of it and be like, okay, I'm just going to leave it. You're speaking different languages. They think they're being helpful. They're not. I'm going to take a step back, and I think if it's something that is very deep and kind of systematic, I think it's important to call it out a little bit, to speak to it and say, when you say something like this, just so you know, this is what is going on with me. And maybe sort of starting a conversation about it. Sometimes some friends can be receptive to that, some are not, some will get it, some won't. But I think at the end of the day, just knowing that like they're speaking from their point of view and they don't understand my point of view in the same way that I don't necessarily understand theirs. So it's a little bit of, sometimes I think those moments where people think they're trying to be supportive and it's really just like, sometimes I kind of just have to like grain of salt, like, okay, thanks, you know. And then I call Laura and be like, you'll never believe what so just kidding.
Yeah, and I do think that there's something to be said about like, you're not going to get everything that you need from one person. And so like you said, Katie, I totally want to emphasize, like if someone is just keep saying things that are very hurtful and triggering for you, those conversations are really important. It sounds like with this person, maybe they have been having those conversations and the other person isn't changing their behavior. So I think at that point, like it may be up to you to decide how important is that person to you, and are you willing to keep like going through that in order to try to have a strong relationship with them. But I do think that it can be really scary to be interacting with anyone who's in like a lot of grief and pain because you don't know what to say. And I know you know, I've mentioned when I was younger, a lot younger, I had a friend who got cancer and I pretty much just dropped off on him because I did not know. I was terrified. I did not know how to be with him in grief. I did not know how to talk to him or what to say. And I just felt so incapable of like giving him the answer or the support that he needed, that I just kind of stopped calling and stopped, like I checked out. And I'm embarrassed about that now. I would handle it very differently. But I think that it's really hard to know for our friends who see us going through so much to know what to say to us. And so sometimes they can say things that they don't realize are insensitive or hurtful. And so I do think, like you said, Katie, in those moments, like maybe that friend is not going to be exactly what you need in terms of support, and they may say insensitive things sometimes, but maybe you enjoy the friendship for what you can have with that person, and you introduce more people into your support circle that really get what you're going through and can be that kind of support that you need, so that you're getting what you need from like from multiple avenues, instead of hoping that this one person is going to always say the right thing or be what you need. No one can do that. It's just unrealistic. I think having that like really strong support system that's diverse and that you can go to for different things is really good for helping to balance that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we kind of just covered this one. How do you strike the balance between giving people some slack in friendships, as everyone has ups and downs, and also keeping healthy boundaries? So, I mean, I think again, we've kind of covered this. I think it's about communication and letting someone know when what they're doing is hurtful, because they may not understand it. And so trying to approach them in a way where if you can rehearse what you're going to say in advance, and again, include your empathy and compassion and focus on how you're feeling, instead of saying you always do this and you're terrible, that probably won't go over as well. But yeah, I think that slack, you know, just part of it is going to be how empathetic are they, how compassionate are they, how willing are they to meet you part way. If they slip up sometimes, like everyone's going to do that, we're human, but if it's consistent and you just always leave those interactions feeling like crap, maybe that's time to like reevaluate if that's someone you want in your life. Okay, so what do you say to people who ask you when you'll have kids? Do you tell them straight up that you're childless, or tell them it's none of their business?
Okay, that's from Thanya. Hey, Thanya. Well, it's tricky. I still find this tricky. And I guess it's that tricky that I only told my mother-in-law April last year. I only told her April last year that I couldn't have kids, and it took so much guts. I remember being sat there shaking like an absolute leaf because I was petrified that I was going to let her down, that I wasn't going to be the daughter-in-law that she wanted. And she gave me the best answer ever, like, that path's not meant for you. But I guess I'm getting older. I'm 38, and people are starting just to stop asking me that question, which is quite good, actually. And actually now I'm pretty confident in saying I can't have kids. I don't necessarily always like some of the responses I get, but I'm pretty straight up and I actually just say I'm okay with it. And I think I've got to my point where I'm quite blunt in the best way to kind of point out that I don't want to get into the ins and outs with it. And also, I also feel like that shouldn't be a question that you get asked, to be honest.
Yeah. I sometimes just like you, I'm at the point where I'll just say like, actually I can't have kids. And that usually shuts down the conversation. And so then we can like move on.
Unless then they're like, but you could adopt.
Yeah, right. And then your eyeballs roll out
You're
of your
like,
head.
thanks, I've never heard of that. What is this thing you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so I'm actually putting together a workshop on this. I have all the content for it, I just need to record it. So it is a whole hour-long workshop on how to like respond in different situations depending on how you're feeling and who the person is, and you will end with it with doing some exercises where you have those responses ready to go. So stay tuned for that. I need to find time to actually put it together and get it up. But that's one of the questions I get asked the most, is like how to handle questions about when are you having kids, or just other intrusive questions. When are you going to adopt, whatever. Yeah. And I think that if I could sum it up in how I view it, it's like a lot of it depends on where I'm at the time. So I have answers ranging from dismissive that are just like aimed to shut the conversation down completely or change the topic, to I'm going to use this as an education tool to like, and that's for on days when I'm feeling stronger. Like, I may try to educate them and like talk to them about what my experience is. And it also depends on the person. So if it's a complete stranger, I may approach that differently, because it's none of their business and they probably don't actually want to know. They're just trying to make conversation. So I'll approach that a lot differently than I will if it's my mother-in-law or somebody that's in my life and that that's going to keep coming up, or it needs to be a more substantive conversation. So that one's tough, but I think a lot of it is like listening to where you're at with your grief. If you're really not wanting to engage and you're, that question's going to be really upsetting when you get it, plan a couple of answers that you can have in your mind in advance, so that when the question comes up, you are ready to go with like a canned answer that will shut it down or change the subject. I'm
just thinking, because I'm a therapist, there is one way you can handle it. Which would be a very therapist answer, but it'd be, oh, I'm really noticing you want to get to know more about me. I'm wondering what's that about. So you kind of flip it back around on them a little bit, because it's an interest. It's somebody trying to take an interest or trying to get to know you. But I think sometimes society gears us too much to ask those questions. Like, how do I get to know this person? They look this certain age. Do they have kids? Because they might also be infertile for all we know. And they're just trying to figure out, will you understand where I'm coming from? So I think sometimes you've got to kind of shift the perspective on a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the question, do you have kids, can be equally as challenging as when are you going to have kids?
Yeah.
I think at a certain point, because they both are kind of like, no, the end, like I think that can be a hard one to field depending on the circumstance that you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we're actually a little bit over time. We have some more questions. Would you guys be okay staying on for like 10 more minutes to get through a few of these, or do you have a hard stop where you need to go?
No? Good. Okay. Yeah.
So let's get through a couple more questions. We'll just plan to go till my time, 2:15. So this one's really interesting, and I have some thoughts on it. So someone said, I'm pretty new to child-free convos and don't know the panelists well, but many of the child-free accounts I follow seem to overemphasize the child-free aspect of their lives and seem to put so much focus on it. Almost feels like they're overcompensating and trying to convince themselves they're okay. Anyone else feel that, or have you noticed that this is a thing?
I think that the reason that we create these accounts, and look, this isn't my only Instagram account, this isn't the only thing I'm interested in my life, but it is something that is unique to my life that I don't see in a lot of other people in my social circle. So for me, it's sort of like a little, it's like a little like puzzle piece that I lifted out and put over here to start building a new puzzle. So, you know, and those puzzles connect at some point, but it isn't everything about my life, and it isn't everything about me, but it is a thing that I need to like work through and process, and is more comfortable to do in a community than it is by myself. So yeah, I can see that, you know, because these are all of our accounts and all of the things that we put out there are very geared towards this one thing. But I think it's just, that's just the little pocket that we're in. That's the community we're trying to build, but that isn't the only community we're trying to build within our lives. You know, that's part of being a woman, is that we have all of these different things going on, and all of these, so many things to think about, just even in your own physical body and your friendships and your relationships and your work and your this and your that, that I think having a space to just sort of cultivate this conversation is really nurturing.
Yeah.
It isn't necessarily the only thing.
That is so well said, and I totally agree. Like, if you were to look on my Instagram account, obviously it's focused on my, you know, building a life after infertility that is kidless and what that looks like for me. And my aim is to help build a supportive community. So, you know, any events that I have are all going to be focused on this. My post, I don't post on my account unless it somehow intersects with my childlessness, because that's what people come to my account for. But I will say I put about 3 to 5 hours a week into chasing creation. And the other parts of my week are all filled with the other parts of my life that I keep private and I don't talk about. So you'll notice I don't really talk about, or very, very rarely, family relationships, my relationship with my husband, my relationship with friends, my hobbies, other activities that I do, my work, which is very demanding. I work overtime a lot, and that takes up a lot of my life. I don't really talk about those things on my Chasing Creation account, because that's not what people are drawn to in terms of what they're looking for when they come to that space that I've created. So I think it probably does. I actually had someone comment who's a mom who messaged me and said, like, maybe if you focused on other areas of your life, you wouldn't have so much grief, or something along those lines. And it was a little bit frustrating because, first of all, the grief is, excuse my language, a total bitch to get through. Like, it is the hardest thing I've ever gone through, is like getting through that grief and getting to a place where I feel good and I'm creating something else with my life and having another focus. But that being said, I do have a lot of interests that just don't come up on my account, because that's not what people are looking for when they come to it. So
yeah, totally.
Okay, so let's see. I think we have 2 different questions about resentment, which I don't know if they're from the same person, but maybe we can kind of combine them. So the first one said, any advice on how to move through the resentment? Many in the chat talk about how lifetime friends disappear when they have kids, or even family members who don't reciprocate with mutual interest, making time, etc. Katie mentions approaching, this is the second question, Katie mentions approaching everyone with grace. Totally agree, but it always feels like we're the ones that have to give and tolerate so much. That's where the resentment gets overwhelming. How do we move through that resentment? So kind of 2 questions that both are talking about the resentment piece.
Oh, I guess for me, I think that's where these communities count, and they really come to the forefront. That's about us finding that shared language that we speak about, that understanding of this complexity of layers of emotions that we deal with on a daily basis. There are friendships that won't last the course, and it's about for me, it's about tuning in about if that having that feeling is doing yourself any favors. Is this good for me? Holding on to this, what is this doing for me? If you're to let it go, how will you feel? And it's hard because there is that grief of friendships, but it's about moving through it and thinking about, like I said, thinking about how you will feel once you know that feeling's gone. And like for me, I know I've had tricky situations, but that's where the beauty of Kadi and I being friends has been absolutely pure magic. I can ring her on WhatsApp or leave her a WhatsApp message in floods of tears, which I have done before, and I've tried to delete, and she's like, Laura, I got it. I was like, oh, okay. But it's about having that community. It's making sure you've got those people around you to bounce it off, also to get perspective, to really understand, are you blowing this out of all proportion, or is this real? Yeah. What do you think, Kadi?
I think that's totally right. And I also think like acknowledging the resentment is an important part too. You know, I have found sometimes, I think when you can put a name to an emotion, it's helpful to move past it. Because yeah, you're right. Resentment isn't something that we all want to live with. It doesn't feel good on the inside. So when you have, for me, when I have these like really complicated emotions, if I'm able to say like, wow, that's like really not a good color on me. Like, what can I do to let that go? What can I, you know, is it worth it? You know, and yeah, I have also had friendships that haven't lasted the course, and for whatever reason, and that's fine too. And I think being okay with like not judging yourself because of that level of resentment, it's going to happen. It has happened for all of us, I'm willing to believe. And being like, wow, okay, that's coming up, and that's coming up because of this thing. Okay, now I know that this thing creates this issue in me, so I have to deal with that. Because the resentment usually isn't, whatever it's about is the real thing. The anger that you're feeling in that moment, or whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment, isn't really the source of the problem. It's because it's speaking to something else. And you just, okay, now I'll look at that. Okay, that we can sort through. And I think that kind of that helps you take like step with your long-term friends that you do have like deep love for. That's kind of what helps go step by step, is like, okay, when this happens, I feel this, check, got it, you know, and you can kind of keep going on.
Yeah. I'd also like just to add to that, you know, like that feeling of resentment when you're identifying where it's coming from, is also looking at the level of support you actually need to have for yourself. And that might be actually accessing therapy, because dealing with infertility is not straightforward. We deal with it every single day. I know I'm on a roller coaster. Some days I breeze through it. Some days I'll get a message and I'll be floored and I have no idea why, but it's just happened. But I think it's really important that you can explore where that's coming from, figure out what your triggers are, how you can manage them, and have that continuity of support through your life at that point that you really need it. And I think there's a lot of shame sometimes around needing a therapist, or there can be over here. I don't know what it's like for you guys in the States, but I would really say if you can do it, please do. And I don't necessarily mean, I'm speaking here very much from the UK perspective. A lot of people think that you have to get a referral through a GP. You don't. There are a lot of places that do charitable donations, so it doesn't mean you have to pay full whack to go and see a therapist, but check it out. That's something, one of our Anotherhood goals is to put up a signposting service actually of good places that you can get support.
And I just want to add on to that. Everyone who follows my account on Instagram probably knows that I am a huge proponent of therapy for if you are feeling really overwhelmed, or in my case, I struggle with anxiety and depression. The anxiety is something, actually both are something that kind of peak, and sometimes they're really high and I'm just in the middle of it, and then sometimes they are almost absent when I'm doing well. But I have seen therapists throughout my life for different things, and found that finding someone who specialized in infertility was really great at helping me as I was making the adjustment to ending my fertility treatment and moving toward a child-free life. And I am actually seeing someone right now as well in the new place that I'm at. And if you find a good therapist, it can be really helpful. For those who are in the US, check with your insurance. Sometimes your insurance will cover it, especially if you are dealing with anxiety or depression, something that has a diagnosis attached to it. A lot of times that is required for it to be covered by therapy here in the US, or by insurance here in the US. If you don't have coverage through your insurance, there are therapists that will do pro bono work, or if you find an infertility counselor that runs like a support group, it would actually be a therapy group, that those can be cheaper sometimes than doing individual. And I am not a therapist, but I do run a monthly support group that you can join if you're just looking to talk through some of the issues that you're having. Again, it's not therapy. I'm not a licensed therapist. It's more of a peer-led support group where you can just come and talk to others, which is very different from therapy. Therapy is a different focus. So I think both are very important, kind of different ideas behind them, but they can work together, I think, too.
Can I just touch on one of the things? Somebody just put something in the comments and they said they were finding it very hard to find a therapist. I think one thing as a therapist, when I meet a new client, I always put the caveat, we figure out together if we're gonna work together. So the first session is always kind of a free one. I would say to anybody that is going to meet a therapist, you don't have to go with that one. Don't go with them unless you click, because you really have to understand that you're going to be laying everything out. Hopefully, you're going to be getting to the deep, dark points. Don't sit there and think, oh, this doesn't work. Treat it like an interview. You know, when you go for an interview for a job, you should always be interviewing that company to see whether you want to work for them. If you have a bad feeling, don't do it. Even if the pay is great, don't do it. If a therapist goes, yeah, I can see you like now, question it a little bit, do your homework on it, but really make sure you get that good gut click that you feel like you can speak to that therapist. Sorry, I ran over. That's really important for you to say.
No, I 100% agree. And I mean, I do have a master's in social work, so I'm not a therapist, but I did have to take some clinical classes for that. Yeah. And I remember in one of them, one of the things that came up, and I can't remember the percentage, but I want to say it was like 80 or 85% of a therapeutic relationship. The success of it is determined by your relationship and how you feel like you click with that person. The other like 15 or 20%, whatever it was, is like what type of therapy do they use? What interventions are they using? Like that's a much smaller part in terms of how successful your experience in therapy is going to be than the relational part. And so totally agree, Laura. When I have found therapists, I'll usually test out 2 or 3 before I select someone. And I base that off of like, how do I feel when I'm around them? How you know, how do I think it's going to work? How comfortable I am around them? And I found some really good ones, and I've had some just awful ones. So don't be afraid to stop going if you're not getting what you need from her, or if it's not a good fit. So I know we're very over, so I'm going to wrap up. I do want to just really quickly address, someone asked, does it hurt women who struggle with infertility when women who are child-free by choice talk about their story? I would say absolutely not. I love hearing stories from women who are child-free by choice, again, because I think it helps me see my situation from a different perspective and help me see some of the more positive aspects to living a child-free life. So I love it. So I see Kadi and Laura nodding their heads too. So share your stories. And then are the interviews you do available on podcasts? I don't know if that's for you guys.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Listen.
Not yet. For me, if you guys are interested in the other webinars that I've done, they are available on my YouTube channel for Chasing Creation, so you can check out. I think this is my 8th or 9th one, so the other ones are up there. I have different guests every month, different topics. So thank you to everyone who joined. This was, I think, the most people we had joining live, and that showed in the chat box. You guys had a lot going on there, which I love. So I hope you guys were able to make some connections and chat with each other there. And again, if you guys are interested in the virtual childless support circle that I host, the next one is on May 31st. There's only 2 spots left, but if it fills up, I can open up a second session. I haven't scheduled it yet because this one's not filled, but if it fills up, I can schedule another one to accommodate a second group this month. Those are monthly. I do these monthly, and then of course, you can connect with me on chasing.creation on Instagram or on my website, chasingcreation.org. So I want to give you guys one more chance to let people know where they can find you.
We're on Instagram at Anotherhood_stories and on the internet at anotherhood.org. Okay.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I hope everyone has an awesome day. Bye.
Take care. See you later. Bye.